I'm Joe Farace. Welcome to the latest episode of Film Friday Videos. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that's kind of been on my mind lately, and that is medium format cameras. And before we jump into the topic, I want to make sure that you understand that when I talk about these cameras, I'm not saying that you should go out and buy one right away, or you should own a medium format camera, or everybody should own a medium format camera. That's not it. If this subject appeals to you, especially after you hear what I have to say, great. If not, that's cool too. I mean, I have mainly just one medium format camera. We can't hardly count the Holga. And I've had some problems with it lately, so I've been kind of shopping for a new medium format camera, and these are some of the things I've kind of run into along the way. But before we get started with that, let's define what medium format is, because it's very simple to look at what a 35mm camera is. When Oscar Barnack, back in the 1920s or wherever it was, invented the first Leica, he came up with the 24x36 format. And while Japanese cameras later on played around with the format, including half-frame formats and stuff like that, ultimately settled down to 24x36. So every 35mm recent SLR film camera uses a 24x36 standard. There are some exceptions, and maybe we'll get to them today. But in medium format, there are many, many different formats. But they share one thing in common, and that is they use roll film. So right away, you can tell the biggest advantage of medium format cameras. Big negatives. Big negatives translate into better big pictures. And so if you want to create some fine art images, that 30x40 prints to hang on the wall in the art gallery, this is the way to go. But medium format cameras come in different shapes and formats, as you can tell by looking at some of the cameras online. For instance, first of all, they're measured in centimeters and not millimeters. So right away, we talk about a Hasselblad uses a 6x6 centimeter format. That's really 60x60 millimeters. But there are smaller formats, like the 645 format that Pentax and Mamiya and Barnack, and who knows other people who made 645 format. But there's more. There's 6.6x7 format. And that was like cameras like the Pentax 6.7, or the camera that's gotten the most hype in all this recent rebirth of film energy, and that is the Mamiya RB67. Mamiya, they made all kinds of different formats. I mean, they made 645 cameras, they made 6x6 cameras, they made 6x7 cameras. They made a lot of different cameras, and so did Fuji. Fuji not only made cameras that were 6x6 and 6x7, but they made cameras that were 6x9 and 6x17. Yes, there was a 6x17 Fuji wide panoramic camera, obviously, that got 3 exposures per roll. So there's all kind of sizes, and there's all kind of reasons to use them. It's up to you to decide what format that works for you. Me, personally, I fell in love very, very early with the 6x6 format. I really like that square format. And so that's why I was attracted to the Seagull that I shoot. But necessarily, there's no dynamic in the composition of a square. It's a different kind of aesthetic. You may like it, you may hate it. There's lots of choices in medium format cameras, so you're not limited to one. So keep that in mind when you're shopping, that first you should find out what format you really want, that you like. Do you like the 6x7? I mean, look at a camera like the Pentax 6.7. It looks like a big 35mm SLR, I mean big. And there are 2 versions of that. So you really get into the nuance of these cameras, and you'll find that over time, that they evolved and into different ways, and better, usually better. So that's the thing to keep in mind. What format do you want to use? And once you've picked one, then it's time to go looking for a camera. Now there's pros and there's cons. The biggest pro, of course, is the large film surface, the big negative, the big chrome. Whatever you shoot, you can make big prints. And that, plus there's the aesthetic of the large format and looking at the negatives. It's just a wonderful experience. I really, even with the Holga, when I look at the frames of the Holga on the light box in my workroom, the one thing I noticed was these aren't terrible. I mean, I was amazed. I thought that would be junk because the camera is junk. But the images, they spoke to me. I really liked it. I really wish the camera was like more like a $20 camera instead of a $10 camera that you have to pay 40 bucks for. But anyway, big negative is the big advantage. Also, I think an advantage is a smaller number of frames. Why do you think they came up with 24 exposure rolls? Well, for some people, there's this very famous syndrome called the CEV syndrome that Photo Labs had coined that term many years ago. And the CEV is Christmas, Easter, and vacation, all on the same roll. And they would see that when they were processing. So fewer frames. I mean, the idea of if I was doing a portrait session and I was shooting it with 6x6, I would get 12 exposures. I'm thinking, first of all, you'd work a little harder on each one, trying to make it as good as you could before you snap the shutter, instead of doing the spray and pray method that a lot of digital photographers, and even one of my old friends, Stan, used to do with the film photography back in the day. Nevertheless, it makes a more deliberate approach. The fewer number of exposures means fewer number of frames to edit. I mean, I know wedding photographers now shoot 400, 500, 600 shots, I'm sorry, during a wedding. That's insane. I mean, having to edit that is mind-boggling. 12 shots, that's pretty cool. So I kind of like the idea of having fewer frames. So really the big difference is the big negative. The cons, well, that is a complicated story, because what's happened in this resurgence, if we can use that expression here, of interest in film photography is that certain cameras have become less available. But I think there's some truth and maybe some myth about that. Let's talk about the truth. I was trying to find out how many cameras Mamiya made of the RB67, how many models they made. I could never find that production figure. But I know Canon made 3 million AE1s. It was hugely popular film camera. So you have to ask yourself, there's got to be fewer cameras available. It's mostly aimed at pros and wedding photographers as well. And these people use these cameras as tools. So much like a hammer, you don't pay much attention to what kind of condition your hammer is in. These cameras got hammered. And so the survival rate on cameras like the RB67 are probably much, much smaller than that from a Canon AE1, where I was able to get an absolutely, totally mint, I mean really mint, not Japanese mint, a camera, because it probably wasn't used that much and was put on away. That didn't happen to an RB67. An RB67 got slapped onto a tripod and got to photograph thousands and thousands of high school seniors. So they wear out and they get beat up. So there's fewer of them made, fewer of them available. But then there is the myth part. This is actually one of Farace's laws of many things, including cars, Lego sets, as well as cameras. And that is, if you have enough money, you can buy whatever you want. If you don't care that you can buy a Hasselblad 500 CM in mint condition for $6,000, well, geez, you can find a couple of those and you'll be really happy. So anything's available if you want to spend the money. The secret is trying to find them at affordable prices. It's very easy to find a Canon AE1 or an AE1 program or even a Nikon FM at reasonable prices and in fairly good shape. Now, some people don't care what shape their camera's in, because basically one of the things I've written about in the past is that camera owners tend to fall into two basic categories that remind me of the odd couple. We have the Oscar Madisons and we have the Felix Ungers. I tend to be on the Felix Unger side and really like my cameras to look nice, and I take care of them. The Oscar Madisons of the world, they don't care. They're just a hammer for them to make images. And if you take a look at Jeff Bridges' Wide Lux in his latest book, which I mentioned in a recent blog post, it looks pretty ratty, but the pictures he creates are amazing. So for some people, they don't care what the camera looks like. Other people do, and that's where the price differences are. Another one of my tips on buying online that kind of works and kind of doesn't work, and that is if you find a seller, especially when you're dealing with overseas sellers or sellers in Japan, that you bought a camera from, and the experience was nice, and the shipping was good, and it was nicely packed, and it was as described, and it was a beautiful camera. You should look at their other items that you might want to buy. And this happened to me recently. I bought my AE1 from a seller. The camera was beautiful. The whole transaction was wonderful. The camera was beautiful. The exposures are amazing. It's just a great camera. So I looked at his other items. Well, it turns out that this camera was like the cheapest camera he had for sale. All the rest were Leicas and Hasselblads, and they were way expensive, way beyond what I could afford. So then I looked at my other seller that I had a recent great experience with, and that was the guy I bought the A1 from. And this was described as near mint, and it is more mint than near. It is a beautiful camera. So I think, well, let me look at what else this guy has for sale. So I take a look at his other items, and I come across a Mamiya 645. Now I'm kind of wishy-washy on the 645 format. I really prefer the 6x6, but this one looked nice. $555 was a good price with a lens and a waist level finder. I prefer the waist level finder. And so I'm looking at the first picture. The camera looks great, and I'm looking at the other pictures, and there's a picture of the back of the camera, and there's a giant hole in the back of the camera. Well, this is a near mint, and we talked about mint in my video that I did on buying cameras from Japan, and if you get a chance you can take a look at it. But sometimes sellers are exuberant in their descriptions, but a camera with a big hole in the back I think would kind of make the pictures a little fuzzy and not that well exposed. But it was near mint, so there is a problem with availability, but not if you're willing to spend money that you don't have or would like to have or dream about having. That's in a nutshell the story of medium format. One reason why I'm shopping is when I shot my Seagull TLR recently and got the film back, I noticed there were fine scratches in the scans, and I spoke with the people at the darkroom and asked them to take a peek at the film before they mailed it back to me. And they said they look like marks from the pressure plate. Well, that's exciting, since I just spent $250 to have the camera repaired and CLA'd. So I haven't gotten the film back as we record this. I'm going to see if I can't clean it up. But meanwhile, I'm looking for another medium format camera, and I don't have an unlimited amount of money to buy a $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 Hasselblad. So I'm going to be a thrifty shopper, and maybe we'll do a follow-up to this to let you know how my search goes. But in the meantime, I'd like to wish all of you the happiest of holidays, the healthiest of New Year's, and thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again here real soon.